All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to try and decode a single, powerful strategy that connects something like the war in Ukraine to, believe it or not, events happening right here at home. It's wild, but we're seeing the same playbook pop up over and over again.
So, that really brings us to the big question here, right? Is this so-called Trump Doctrine some kind of masterclass in shaking things up, maybe for the better? Or is it just pushing everything, all our complex global systems, right to the breaking point? Let's dig in and find out.
Okay, so to really get what ties all this together, we first have to define the core strategy at play. It's something we can call the pressure principle.
So what is the Trump Doctrine, really? Well, at its heart, it's all about applying maximum pressure, just relentless pressure. The whole point is to just completely blow up the way things are, disrupt the system. Whether it's a military stalemate, a trade agreement, or even just public opinion, the goal is to force everybody back to the negotiating table to hammer out a completely new deal.
So to see how this actually plays out in the real world, we're going to look at 5 totally different fronts where this whole idea is being tested right now. And I mean, from huge international conflicts all the way down to domestic policy and even personal branding.
All right, first up, let's look at the world stage. I mean, this is where the stakes are just absolutely massive. We're going to check out 3 cases where this pressure principle is making some serious waves internationally.
So, our first front, Ukraine. What we're seeing here is the doctrine playing out as this really high-stakes gamble, a peacemaker's gambit, if you will. The idea is to just shatter the military stalemate and force some kind of end to the war.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Look at the split here. It is dramatic. On one side, you've got Russia's Dmitry Medvedev calling Trump an effective leader. But then, on the complete other side of the coin, you have a key Ukrainian governor, Vitaly Kim, who's basically sounding the alarm, warning about appeasement and drawing parallels to the 1930s. And that's the core of it right there. Is this genuine peacemaking, or is it a really dangerous concession?
Now, this quote right here, it kind of points to what might be driving all of this on a personal level. Our sources are saying that a huge piece of this puzzle is legacy. The idea is that Trump wants to be remembered as the guy, the deal maker, who brought peace. And, that's a powerful motivator when you're playing such a high-risk game.
Okay, let's shift gears to our second front, Iran. And here, we see this really fascinating two-pronged approach. It's like combining this overwhelming military threat with an offer to talk. It's the classic Armada and the olive branch.
So, how does that actually work? Well, let's break it down. The pressure part is pretty clear. You deploy a naval armada, complete with an aircraft carrier like the USS Abraham Lincoln, right into the region. That sends a message. And the disruption, well, that's the intended result. Trump then comes out and claims that this show of force is actually working, that Iran is now seriously talking about their nuclear program. You see? Pressure, then disruption.
All right, for our last global example, let's jump into the world of economics. We're talking about the trade relationship with the European Union, and it's turning into what some are calling a big bazooka standoff. Sounds intense, right?
And the stakes could not be higher. This quote from Ireland's leader, Michel Martin, really just nails the sense of dread here. He's basically saying, hey, if these never-ending tariff threats from the U.S. keep coming, the EU might have to fire back with its own economic superweapon, what they're calling the big bazooka. And if that happens, he warns, the whole thing could just implode, and everybody suffers. It's a classic game of chicken.
Okay, so now let's bring this whole thing back home. Because this idea, this doctrine of pressure and disruption, it's not just for foreign policy. Nope, it's being used on some really big issues right here inside the U.S.
And that brings us to our fourth front, Minneapolis. The city has become a real flashpoint in this clash between federal immigration policy and what are known as sanctuary cities. And critics have a pretty stark name for what's happening, a theater of fear.
To really understand what that means, to make it less abstract, just look at this number. The administration has apparently set a target of 3,000 immigration arrests per day. I mean, think about that. This isn't just some vague goal. It's a specific, high-pressure quota. It's designed to force compliance from local governments and totally disrupt those sanctuary policies.
And, these tactics have drawn some really sharp criticism, and not just from activists, but from the courts themselves. This quote is just, wow. A federal judge actually went so far as to compare this push for quotas to the actions of King George III, the king from the American Revolution. That's a heavy comparison.
Okay, for our fifth and final front, we're going to pivot a little bit. We're going to see how this doctrine moves from big government policy to something as personal as public image. We're talking about how this whole pressure principle applies to branding,
specifically the branding of Melania Trump, who some have called the Sphinx in the Tower.
Just look at the numbers here. They really tell the story of just how big this operation is. We're talking about a $75 million movie. And get this, a huge chunk of that, more than $28 million, is said to have gone straight to Melania Trump. So, yeah, this is not your average documentary. This is a massive branding enterprise, plain and simple.
So, what's the point of all that money and effort? What's the strategic goal? Well, the film is a calculated move. It's an act of disruption. The idea is to pressure and completely take apart the old story, the narrative of Melania being this sort of reluctant prisoner in the White House, and swap it out for a totally new one, the story of a calculating, willing partner in the whole Trump political operation.
Okay, so let's take a breath. We've just looked at 5 super different situations. I mean, a war, a potential nuclear crisis, a trade fight, a battle over immigration, and even a PR campaign. But now we connect the dots, because there is a very clear pattern here.
This table, right here, basically puts the whole strategy on one page. It's the perfect snapshot. Look, whether it's a peacemaker's gambit in Ukraine or a $75 million movie, the specific tactic changes, right? But the goal is always the same. You apply pressure to break the system so you can force a new deal.
When you look across all 5 of these fronts, you start to see these common threads weaving them all together. What are they? Well, first, it's a strategy built on high-stakes brinkmanship, going right to the edge. Second, it's a complete rejection of the status quo, of the way things have always been done. And third, it's laser-focused on one thing, forcing a new deal. And it'll use any leverage it can get, military, economic, you name it, even cultural leverage.
And all of this brings us right back to where we started, back to that big question. So, now that you've seen the pattern laid out, what do you think? Is this some kind of masterclass in the art of the deal? A chaotic but maybe effective way to solve problems that seem impossible? Or is it just a reckless strategy that's pushing an already fragile world right to the breaking point?
Well, one thing is for sure. The strategy itself is incredibly consistent. But the outcomes, the end results of all these high-stakes gambles, that's the thing. They are nowhere near decided. All of this is still playing out right now as we speak. But now, at least you have the framework to watch it all unfold and make sense of it for yourself.